Welcome to What Are You Even Talking About? I'm your host, the Nomothete. Today's guest is Dr. Toni Cooper. She is a psychologist, author, and public speaker. Since 1986, she has been teaching adults the coping strategies to grow emotionally, build healthy relationships, and recover from trauma. Toni's mission is to help people find the courage, confidence, and comfort they need to become fully alive. For many years, Toni helped train medical students as an adjunct assistant professor at the Northeast Ohio University's College of Medicine. She is a frequent guest on local radio to discuss topics related to coping with common challenges. Dr. Cooper has created a variety of media to help people learn how to cope more effectively with the challenges of life. You can find her videos on YouTube and her podcast called Life Without Baggage on your favorite platform. She has written 7 books that help people connect distortions and build confidence in their coping. Her latest book addresses issues connected with anxiety and helplessness. Dr. Cooper is in private practice at Wellspring Counseling Center in Uniontown, Ohio. In her free time, she enjoys playing pickleball, hiking, and ballroom dancing. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So we like to start every episode with a question from the last guest. And the question you got is, who are you at your core?
At my core. Okay. So I would say at my core, I am funny. I am curious and I am driven.
Good answer. I like that.
I
I
was hoping
myself,
I
go
was
ahead, go
hoping
ahead.
I would get an easy question.
I don't know. All the guests I've had, have pretty crucial questions. So can't wait to hear yours. What inspired you to focus on anxiety, depression, and adult survivors of dysfunctional families in your book and podcast?
Well, I started in practice, as you mentioned, in 1986. And I noticed over and over and over the things that people were coming for help with were related to anxiety, depression. And I found a huge percentage of the people who came for counseling had some kind of trauma in their background. So as I developed professionally, I began to really delve into these areas, what causes them, what are the different contributing factors in family and biology, and then what do you do with it so that people don't just suffer and struggle their whole lives. So that kind of developed my professional interests. And then when I started developing media and started my podcast, I thought, well, I should talk about something I know about. So
Yeah.
I settled on those.
So, do you think that trauma has gotten worse over the years? Like, have you seen more trauma like as the years have gone by?
I do think it's increasing all the time. Some of it, I think, is related to as families kind of disintegrate, then there aren't two adults in the home. And, if one person's off, but the other one's on, at least one person might be noticing something's not right, or I don't like the way this person interacts with our kids or whatever. But when there's only one person running everything, you can't be on top of all of it. And then it does seem as though, experts talk about how disruptions in neighborhoods, because it used to be you lived in one neighborhood forever and everybody knew each other and neighbors looked out for each other. Well, you don't have that working in your favor anymore either. And the church or religious community used to be another layer of protection for people. And that has been severely disrupted. So all of the things that used to hold cultures together and families together and people together, as those disappear, it becomes harder and harder to navigate life. And you're just more at risk for something happening.
I've noticed a lot of when it comes to mental illness and mental health, the way we gather support has gotten more difficult. Like people, don't really support people the way they need to be supported. And I feel like it causes more relapse for mental illness than anything. And I was wondering if what how do you see support? Like, what do you think as support for a person when it comes to mental health?
If you're fortunate, your family is a place of support, but sometimes family is where the trauma occurred. And so, if you're probably familiar with the concept of a scapegoat. So, if in your family you're the scapegoat, you're the one that no matter what happens, it's your fault. You're not going to get any support from your family. And then, as I mentioned, those other structures in the culture that used to be a place of support, those aren't there a lot of times anymore. So people have to actively look for how to find support. So if you're lucky enough to have some great friends, if you have one or two really good friends, that might be enough. If there is a support group in your area that you feel some connection with, that can also help you kind of stay on track or regroup more quickly when something goes wrong. But people have to actively look for support anymore. It's not automatic. It's not easily, readily available. You have to look.
I know for myself, I was going through because I'm diagnosed schizoaffective. Support was really hard to get, and I had to look online. Like the way I got a lot of support was talking to people online on Facebook, social media groups, and I use that as a tool, a positive tool, instead of, just always looking up negative things on the internet and, just having a bunch of negativity come at you. It was really a place for healing for me and acceptance. So I know, that can also be a really good help for some people nowadays. Because you're right, it's very hard to find support nowadays. Like people aren't as open as they were. People don't tend to, it's not, I can't say care, it's just they would rather not deal with anybody else. Like we've become very, you know, just to ourselves. And I think that's really a shame. Um, what is learned helplessness?
Okay, so learned helplessness is a useful concept. It's not a diagnosis. And it's easiest to explain it, Mark, if I give you an example. So you might know that the way they train baby elephants for the circus is when they're little, they tie a rope around their leg, they tie it to a pole or a tree so that every time they try to move, they're pulled back, and then that goes on for however long, months, years, they train that elephant. So by the time it reaches adulthood, they can keep that adult, full grown elephant in one place just by a rope around the leg. And it doesn't have to be tied to anything. So if you think about how this might fit human beings, because they've done research on all kinds of animals and different ages of people, if too many things happen too early in life, or if too many things happen all at once as an adult, or if you have a chronic medical condition, a psychiatric condition that you're born with, uh, poverty, racism, abuse, a violent parent, then what happens is for many people, they figure out how to survive, but they're no longer moving forward in any meaningful way. They're kind of drifting through life. Maybe others control them, and they don't really know what's wrong. They just know they're not happy.
Dealt with a lot of that myself. So I
Yeah.
definitely know where that's coming from. It's a form of conditioning, I would say, that, over time you're just conditioned to do one thing or to be one type of person. And you get stuck in that. And it's really hard to remove yourself from that and to find out who you are for yourself when you spent so many years sometimes, being something for somebody. And it's really hard to describe that feeling that you feel like when something is wrong, but you don't know what it is. And I know in my case that it took me removing myself from those people to see that that wasn't me. And I literally had to look at myself, decide who I wanted to be for me, and work, put forth effort into becoming that person, and, get boundaries and tell people no. And, that's hard to do because you're always worried about what they might think or how they might react. And sometimes you have to not think about that. You have to think about yourself and what you want to be. It can be trying to always people please. I've noticed that in my life. Like
Yeah.
trying to people please just is not the way to go. And you got to do stuff for yourself. You just
Yeah,
got to do stuff for yourself.
it's exhausting to try to please other people, and unfortunately, sometimes the people we're trying to please are never happy.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really big thing because misery loves company. So if it loves company, then it will try to bring you down no matter what you do.
Mhm,
And, a lot of people have people like that in their lives and they don't even realize it.
mhm.
So, how or what are the things that keep people stuck?
So as you mentioned, if you are stuck in one role, I mean, we all have tendencies of how our personality, how we're put together. But if you are stuck in one role where you always want to be in control, or you always want to please other people, or you always want to rescue other people, then you aren't going to be you're going to be a very narrow kind of person. You're not going to be fully whoever you are. God, I believe, designed each of us unique. And if you only stay in one role, you're only a mom, you're only a dad, you're only a sister, you're only this or that or your job. That's a very narrow focus for a human being. And so, one thing is we need to realize where we are out of balance. And many times, our family conditions us, as you said, to be in one role. I'm in charge of this. I'm in charge of that. I'm always supposed to give in to this person or that person. That you can't be yourself if you are controlled by what other people want. Now, we don't want to be selfish, but most of the people that I meet struggle with doing too much of what other people want, and they feel guilty when they say, wow, I don't think I can do that. Or, hey, I'm sorry, that isn't going to work out for me. They feel very guilty. They think they're being selfish. And I don't think selfish people worry about being selfish. If you're worried
Agreed.
about it, if you're worried about it, you probably aren't. But if you're not used to charting your own course. We need to be in control of our own life. We don't need to be in control of anybody else. I mean, if you own a property or if you have children, you do need to be, you need to be at the steering wheel there and you need to be guiding the ship. But when we're talking about friendships, partners, adult relationships, you don't want to be in control of somebody else and you don't want to be controlled. That's not emotional intimacy.
I I know from my own experiences that was a hard thing for me. Um, I felt like I always had to do what other people said, and it was everybody. It wasn't just one person. It was literally everyone in my life. Like I was just pulled so many different directions because I was always having to do something for somebody else, and they expected it, especially over time. So they expected me to do these things, and when I would say no, then I got punished for it, basically. And or they would make you feel guilty, or they would just, talk down to you. Whatever they had to do in order to get you to do whatever they want you to do. And it's amazing how fast it goes from nice to me. And we don't realize that they're being mean to us usually, but we feel so guilty for not being able to do something. Like it's hard not to do that. And for myself, I couldn't get around not being able to do something for somebody, no matter who it was. And I started to realize that that's no way to live because I'm not living for myself. Like I just didn't know what to do with my life if I wasn't helping other people. And I still have that problem. Still have that problem to this day.
Mhm.
But I've gotten better at learning who is in my life, in order to see what I need to do for them, that also I can do things for myself.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I've gotten a lot better with that. Um, what
Well,
are
can
coping?
I say a
Oh, go
couple
ahead.
of things about that? So, people who are naturally giving and compassionate, which it sounds like you are,
Yeah,
um, it's easy for you to give. So, you need to know that it is also going to be easy for you to be taken advantage of. So,
yeah,
if other people do not accept a polite no, I can't, or wow, that's not going to work out, if they don't accept that, if they add, add the guilt, or they get snotty with you, or whatever your word, there's other words for it.
yeah,
If they get nasty with you, then they don't really care about you. A healthy relationship, both people win. So if you're always giving and you get a bad attitude when you say, that's not going to work out. Or heaven forbid you ask for something, you get attitude. You need to know that person has too big of a place in your life and you want to make some adjustments. So if you tend to be a very giving, compassionate person, you're going to have to protect yourself a little bit better and maybe even hold back a little bit when you first are getting to know a person or dating. Because if your tendency is to want to move in and do this for that and that, this for them, you need to test does this person give back or do they just take? And the people that I've worked with that are very compassionate, it's hard for them to hold back. But you should start off holding back a little bit and see what comes back to you.
yeah. I definitely need to do that more often. Uh, I'm learning. I'm still a work in progress every day,
Hey, we all
and
are.
yeah, and it just feels so bad when you don't. And I think that's the conditioning. Like you're set, you're made to be that way, and it's hard to learn that I need things as well, and
Hmm.
I need time for me as well, and all
Hmm.
these things. Like you just have to set aside a time to know what you need, and because everyone needs something, and it's
Hmm.
like, would you have to do the things for yourself in order to stop people from using you? And I know that's really hard for some people. Um,
So I want to make a couple comments on that, and maybe this is going to lead to your next question. But
okay,
when you're trying to make a change, something that isn't automatic, what I encourage people to do is they need to start writing down some things to say to themselves, S- and then write it down, and then maybe review it every day, almost like a flashcard. When kids are learning to add and subtract. So if your tendency is to give, 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 then you might need to write down for yourself 3 or 4 I call coaching statements. It is important for me to be in balance. That might be one of them. It is important for me to take time for myself. That's another one. It isn't selfish to take care of myself. That's another one. I want to teach people that my needs count. So you might need to, like, it's like building a train track in the brain. Your brain wants to go on the old track. But if you want to think differently and feel differently and behave differently, you got to build a new track. And so even by having 3 or 4 simple things to say to yourself, to remind yourself you're building a new way of thinking, a new way of behaving. And at first it's a little awkward, but it can become automatic. But really it can be that simple. You're training your brain, you're conditioning yourself to think differently.
well, see, that's what I was going to ask you, because I was going to ask about coping strategies. Um, I know for myself, once again, it's so hard not to do those things. And I do tell myself things every day. Like I make sure I wake up, I'm like, okay, this is what we're gonna do. We're not gonna say yes to everybody. We're going to, tell them our needs as well. And then by the end of the day, I'm like, I did not do that. I did not do
Mm.
that at all. And it's like I forget while I'm talking to the person, uh, not, to be able to say no. Like, so they'll ask me something so fast that I'll just go ahead and say yes and not even think about it. I guess that's conditioning too, isn't it?
Mhm. And so what another thing that works for people is, besides having it written on a card that you carry around or a screenshot on your phone of those attitudes you're developing, the other thing is is you can try to develop a habit of saying, let me get back to you. You don't say yes, don't say no. Say, let me get back to you. And then you can weigh, do I want to say yes to this? Is this person always bugging me for this, that, or the other? You know, they want me to help them move and they've never helped me once. So you can buy yourself time and then give yourself a chance to think about it. So you can say, let me get back to you. And then you have a chance to weigh. I don't have to say no. I don't have to say yes. What do I want to say? What do I need to say?
That makes a lot of sense. That makes so much sense. I think I'm gonna have to start using that a lot more in my own life. As a person who is very spiritual, I know there's a what's the way I want to put this? There's a connection between faith and mental health. Like a lot of people don't think about it in those terms, but there is. A lot of people who have faith have better mental health when it comes down to how they think about things and how things are controlled in their life. So, how does one's view of God impact the ability to draw on their faith?
So that is a really good point. There is a lot of research that shows that people who have a faith they can draw on will cope better when there's a medical problem, when there's challenges in life. But the other thing that is a complication is that most people know that your view of God might be connected to your view of your father. It can also be connected to your view of your mother. It's not completely simple, but the idea is if you experienced a lot of rejection and criticism, then you might be a little bit afraid of God or reluctant to ask him for help because you expect that he is just waiting for you to mess up and then he's going to come down on you. Or if you went to a church that was super harsh with lots of rules and very little grace or forgiveness, then again, God can be contaminated by what other people have done or said. And so we think that God is just like those authority figures or just like that religious person that molested you or whatever. People can contaminate our view of God. But if you read the Bible, I like to read the things that Jesus has said, that Jesus says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden. So that's an invitation to approach. It's not a harsh, demanding, critical. And so when I mess up and I need to ask God to forgive me, I'm not going to like grovel, like, because I expect to be forgiven. Now, it's taken me a long time. I've cultivated my faith. So if you have old attitudes that somebody messed that up for you and it's hard for you to enjoy faith, it might be a little bit of work. But our view of God is affected by our experiences, let's say with authority figures. And so if you can cultivate your faith, it gives you, we talked about family, neighborhood, religious community, friendships. Your private connection to God can be another dimension of support.
Because I know I came from a very strict religious upbringing.
Okay.
It was very, very strict. And, there were so many rules that sometimes you just didn't want to go to church. And and I got older, I associated that with God. And I was always angry with God
Mm.
because I felt like he was those people that told me I was doing wrong or I was going to hell. And, just all the time being told you were going to hell for anything you did. Like you become very upset with guys like, I'm not doing anything wrong. Why am I going to go to hell for this? And then you start to take it out on God. And it's like, it's not God. That's not what God is for us. And we have to literally know who God is for us in order to build a relationship with him.
Mhm.
And that can be very hard when all the people in your life are telling you you're going to hell. Like
Wow.
it's
You're not
just very,
kidding.
yeah,
Yeah.
like the guilt is crucial. And we were very the solitude for our church was very, like, we were a really small church, and it was all certain families, and so it was like the adults had control of the entire thing. So if we didn't do what they sat at a table all together and literally would reprimand us, all of them together. And
Ooh.
so we would sit there and wait for our turn. Like, all the kids sat at one table, all the adults sat at the other, and they would literally go around the table and just ream us for anything we did, or
Ooh.
anything we wanted to be a part of, or anything that we wanted to do in school, or anything we wanted to do outside of school.
My goodness.
Yeah, it was very, very strict. Like, and most people didn't come to our church because it was so strict. Like, we couldn't build an actual community of people because the preach was so strict and their following was so strict. It made it, and I loved church. Like, I was really big into church. I had a really strong faith, and over time, that just pulled at it and pulled away. It made me distant from my religion, and to the point where I'm not even religious now.
Mm.
I'm spiritual, very spiritual, and I have a concept of God for me that works, and I feel like everyone needs to have that.
Mhm, mhm.
Like, no one can make God for you, is, I
That's
guess, what I'm
right.
trying to say.
Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, it's not hard to understand how that kind of upbringing, talk about learned helplessness, right? No matter what you do, you're wrong. So, I'm thinking about one of the movies that I watched. This was like maybe 15 years ago. There was a movie that came out based on books called The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And the main character is a lion who represents God. And it's like that lion was very strong, but he was very gentle with the kids. But boy, if you were evil, you were in trouble. And so sometimes just something like that, something so simple, it penetrates some of those layers of fear of God to see, well, yeah, he will judge evil, but he loves people.
Yeah. That was one of my favorite, book series growing up,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah.
Like, I love that series, and then I did a lot of, like, work on C.S. Lewis, like, to see why he, picked what he did in order to tell the story he wanted to, and it was very comforting to see someone who could take the story of God and put it in a fantastical world that wasn't the Bible. Like, I mean, when you're having to learn the Bible every day to a point of, where you're just crazy about it, it was good to see it in a different context, and it
Mhm.
helped build my love of fantasy. Like,
Ooh,
so
yeah.
it had the big, thing of making me love fantasy even that much more, and it was one of my favorite series growing up. And it's just so beautiful of a story, and how he depicts God as Aslan and, the Snow Queen. Like, it's just very, and children have a big part of it. That's what I think I liked about it so much,
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
that children, made or break the story. Like,
Mm.
and depending on what they chose, it it makes a kid feel like they're a part of something. It makes them feel a part of their world, like they actually make a change. And a lot of kids don't feel like that because they're, feel like they're just kids. So they don't have a outlet for wanting to help and be a part of things.
Mm.
And I feel like that's something we have to learn over time
Mhm.
and actually cultivate in children. Like, I try to do that with my children.
Good point. That is a really good point. That came out when I was an adult, and I didn't read the books until I was an adult. So, but I can see how, wow, that would be a good way to introduce children to the idea that what you do matters and God still has an interest in you. It doesn't happen when you grow up. It happens now.
Yeah.
The other thing, if you want to talk a minute about C.S. Lewis, the other thing that I read of his was called the screw tape letters. And
Yeah.
it helped me understand guilt that isn't from God and evil and the way the enemy makes us think stuff is God, and it has nothing to do with God. It's just to mess with us.
Yep. Yep, I read that too. That was the second book. It was good. One of my favorites because it showed how a devil works. Like, and we can see that in ourselves, like how people are about how they will manipulate things, how they will try to teach it and instill it into others and make it spread. And like, we don't realize the effect of evil and how it really plays out. Like, we don't look at how deceptive it tries to be and how it can, makes its way into things when you don't even realize it.
Mm,
And, it shows how, like I said, how devils operate. And we have to see that as a part of ourselves because we can all be that way. But it's the fact that we choose not to and we choose a higher path that
mm,
makes us amazing because we don't have to be that.
mm,
And so many people, because of the way they grow up, because of things they went through, they feel like that's the only way they can be. But it's a choice. It's always a choice. That was what, God gave us as our greatest gift. We have the opportunity to choose the things we want in life. We don't even have to serve him. He gave us that choice. But in the end, we want to be whole. And to be whole, we have to understand our good sides and our bad sides and come to a conclusion of what we're going to be. So I think
mm.
that, that was a lovely series too, or a lovely book too. It's amazing that you would say those two books because those were two of my favorite books or grouping of books together.
Yeah,
Um,
literature's powerful, isn't it?
it is. I grew up reading a lot of Greek mythology and Egyptian mythology, Roman mythology, the Bible, so much of the Bible. I even went and tried to get my degree in apocalyptic eschatology.
What is
And
that?
that is the study of prophetic books throughout, well, prophetic holy books. So, like the book of Daniel, the book of Revelation.
Oh,
Yeah, like you study the apocalypse basically.
okay.
And
Wow.
yeah, so in all the imagery that it takes into that. And my thesis was going to be on how every grouping of people has their apocalypse. And we're always in our end times because we are living right now. So every day is closer to death. So every day is closer to an Armageddon. It doesn't have to be the symbolism of, the whole planet dies. It's just that we die. That's what we do. Over time, we're going to die. And everyone's going to die. Everyone we know is going to die. And that's our apocalypse. And it doesn't have to be a thing of fear. It can be the revelation. It can be the thing that opens your mind and your heart open, up to getting the best things in life and being the best person you can be and helping one another. It can be the catalyst for your change. And that's what my thesis was going to be on.
Mm. You're a deep thinker.
Only sometimes, only sometimes.
You
Uh,
have got to have fun too, right?
yeah, you got to, especially when your study is apocalypses. Um, yes, but that's why I did also, I was a musical theater major as well.
Okay.
So yeah, I
Get a
mixed
little
the
bit of
two.
everything.
Yeah, and now I'm going back to school for psychology. So
Okay, then.
yeah, I'm trying to get everything in. So my next question is, what is toxic guilt? And where does it come from?
Okay. So, toxic guilt, there's healthy guilt when we do something bad, we feel bad, and then we apologize to the person. Or if you're a person of faith, you ask God to forgive you. Toxic guilt is when you feel horrible, you stay in a place of shame and guilt. And the the experiences you described, Mark, about really being shamed and like constant nitpicking over every little thing, that really promotes an experience of toxic guilt. So it can happen in a church, it can happen in a family, it can happen even in a school. And so toxic guilt doesn't go away when we apologize and take care of it. It just hangs on us. Some people understand it as shame. So, shame is, I'm not sure that we're ever supposed to experience shame for any length of time. And if it hangs on us, if we live in that state, some people live in that state. They're always feeling like I'm not good enough, I, I'm bad, and that there's something intrinsically wrong with me, different from other people. That would be shame or toxic guilt. And that comes usually from rejection or abuse. And it's not healthy, it's not necessary. We should resist it.
So how do we release that? How do we release that guilt and that embrace forgiveness?
So, if you're a person of faith, that is where faith can help you. You take it to Jesus. He died on the cross. You ask him to take that guilt and shame. You Many times you need to forgive the person or persons that made you feel so ashamed and guilty. That you recognize what they did was wrong. It did damage, and you choose to forgive them. When we choose to forgive people, it doesn't mean it's okay. It doesn't mean we should trust them. But when we choose to forgive, we take that burden off of us, because otherwise we're giving them all kinds of power and we carry it with us. We carry the resentment or the hurt, and you don't want to carry that. It shouldn't have happened. You don't want to carry it. So when we choose to forgive, we are releasing what we have been carrying. And then we leave it in the past as best you can. And then start to watch how you talk to yourself. If you talk smack to yourself, then you are really abusing yourself. You want to say kind things to yourself. What I tell people is anything you wouldn't say to someone you love or your child, you shouldn't be saying to yourself. It's not true. It's not realistic. It's not reasonable. So again, we get back to being careful how you talk to yourself. And then sometimes you just have to forgive yourself. You're not going to be perfect.
I think that's been a big problem in my whole life. I don't forgive well. It takes a lot for me to forget the things that people do to me. So when I see them, that's the first thing that comes to mind. Like it really just on as soon as I see them, it starts. And that I go through every single thing they've ever done to me. And it's so hard to trust people. And it's so hard to like make friends and keep friends that way when that's something that happens every time you're with it. And I see it in my son as well. Like when he's talking about something, he remembers every single thing that someone's done. And I didn't think it was a problem until I saw it in him.
Hmm.
I never noticed that I did it until I saw him doing it. And I was like, I've never done that really in front of him, but I noticed it in him too. And I was like, I wanted to change that in him. And I started to change that in myself. So I started literally talking better to myself. And I realized the way I saw other people as what I held myself to. So, like, I held myself to a very high standard
Mm.
and to the point of, like, God is always watching me. I have to do everything God wants me to do or I'm going to hell. And because of that, like, it shaped the entire way that my thinking is, my mindset. So, like, I hold other people to that too. And you can't hold people to that high of a measure because no one's going to reach that.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that until like the last 5 years.
Mm.
And it's changed my life so much. Like I say so much nicer things to myself. And I'm like, don't worry. Like, I know you're stressed about this, but it'll be okay. Like I talk to myself like I would talk to a 5 year old.
Good,
And
good. Yeah.
and I literally have conversations with myself in my head where I talk to myself as the 5 year old and I let myself speak to myself as the 5 year old would. And that's how I fix the problem within myself is
Hmm.
I talk to myself like I'm my own child
Hmm.
and it helps clear things and it helps me be more positive about things. So when things are going wrong, I can handle them better and it doesn't crash like my entire day or make me feel like everything is horrible forever. And like you have to tell yourself that this too shall pass.
Hmm.
And because it always does. No matter
Mhm.
what we do, it always passes and we always get back to a better place. It's just that's how life goes. Like it's a series of ups and downs, and we just have to recognize that.
Mhm. Yeah. And you made a good point. When we are hard on ourselves, it is often hard to be give grace to other people. And again, we're not necessarily talking about trust. Trust has to be earned, and there are people you should not trust. But you don't want to hold resentment because it makes us sick.
Yeah. So let's talk about boundaries because I have an issue with creating boundaries and holding on to those boundaries because some of the people in my life have, when I try to create a boundary, get upset about it and then talk down to me and then do all this other stuff to keep me from keeping that boundary. And I'll usually let it go. So, how do boundaries impact our coping and stress?
Well, yeah. So boundaries are a huge part of protecting your peace, your energy, your sanity. And we've talked about, finding balance, that people who really care about us will accept a polite no. And so if you can, you want to stick to whatever you say. So if you let people bug you or shame you or have a fit or whatever, and then you give in, you're teaching them you don't mean what you say. So we're in charge of keeping our boundaries. We can do it gently, but we need to do it. So you want to be careful that you're as consistent as possible. And then if you feel guilty or angry over what happened, that's okay. And you can talk to somebody about it or journal. But um, people who are selfish don't like boundaries.
They don't.
So so we shouldn't be surprised if someone who is not very healthy doesn't like our boundary. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't still kind of stick to it as calmly as possible. And did I answer your question? Yeah, so part of it
Yeah.
is they're unhealthy people will not like your boundaries, but that you still have to be in charge of your own boundaries as gently as possible. I know the other thing I was going to say. So I compare people sometimes relationships to vending machines.
Okay.
So if you put $1 in a vending machine, well, I guess it would be $5 now, and you get back the cookies that are smashed or the candy bar that has a worm in it or nothing comes out. How many times are you going to put money in that vending machine?
Not many times.
That's right. And yet with human beings, we will keep investing in something that we always get something crappy back. So we need to think about how much we're investing in terms of time, energy, attention. Maybe the person has to be in your life, but maybe they don't have to have as much room as you're giving them. You need to, again, protect your boundaries, your energy, your sanity. And if people take advantage of you, if they always want more, if they don't reciprocate what you're investing, then that person needs less space, I would say. You need to give them way more space, and you spend as much of your time as possible with the people who celebrate you, appreciate you, give you something back. Because otherwise, you're just teaching them to be selfish.
And I was just telling this to a client of mine that like she's in a situation where the person she's with is just horrible. And I'm telling her every day, I'm like, he's doing this because he knows it will get a reaction. He knows this is the thing that gets you to do whatever he wants you to do. So you have to distance yourself as much as you can, even though you can't leave yet. Make sure he knows that you're not gonna do what he wants you to do. And you have your own life and you don't have to do everything he says. And it's hard to tell somebody that when they think they can't get out of this situation.
Mhm.
Like it's so hard. They'll be like, "But I can't leave. Like I'm under their house." And it's like, yeah, but you're still you. You still have free will. Like you're not a slave to them. And I feel like a lot of people think you have to do what they say. Like they just have come up, in their mind that you have to do everything they say all the time.
Mhm.
And that's not healthy. That's not
No,
healthy at all. And it's like,
no.
why would anybody think that when they know if they're put in the same situation, they don't want that?
Hmm. So I would say two things. We're back to that learned helplessness, aren't we? So if a person grew up being controlled, abused, bullied, whatever, then that's probably the kind of partner they're going to end up with. But the other thing is that many times people think if I draw a boundary, I have to do it in a confrontational way. But not necessarily. You can say, "Oh, I didn't get to that today," or "I don't think that's going to work out." You don't have to give a big explanation. You don't have to have an argument. You just very calmly, I don't think I'm going to be able to do that." And, if they want to make it a thing and if they get violent or explosive, you need to call the police.
That's what I told her as well. That's exactly
Okay.
what I said.
Okay.
That because that's the only thing you can do in those situations because it'll get to a point where you might get hurt
Right.
or, it'll escalate to a point that something might happen. And you just have to protect yourself nowadays, especially nowadays because people are a bit more violent in situations.
Yeah.
Um, what are common misunderstandings of boundaries?
So, kind of like I said, that if you, that number one, that people will like, "Oh, that's nice. You have a boundary." It's like, no, it almost never goes that way. They're going to push on it. It's like kids. You tell them no, they're going to try to get you to change their mind. But that doesn't mean you have to change your mind. So, one is that everybody will be happy for you. You have good boundaries. Maybe not. And then the other thing is that it has to be a confrontation. Most of the time, if you are calm and polite and just say, "Oh, I'm sorry, that's not going to work out," or, "Oh, I'm not going to be able to do that," you won't necessarily get a big confrontation back. If you get all emotional and then you wait until you are furious to draw your boundary, you probably will have a big fight. So don't wait until you're so angry that you're not reasonable anymore. People wait too long, they wait till they're angry. And so you don't wait until you're that upset. Just do it gently, do it calmly, and then don't change your mind.
See, my family tells me that I'm the okay person. I'm the person that says, okay. And then I just do what I want. So I guess I hold my boundaries well, even though I didn't think I did, because I'm just
Hmm.
like, yeah, 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 yeah. I'm right on that. I'm on that. I'm gonna do it. Yeah. And then I just don't.
Oh.
And so I just deflect the entire situation. And so, they'll forget after a while. And once they forget, they'll be like, didn't I ask you to? I'm like, what? What are you talking about? Just walk
Mm.
off. And they
Well,
keep speaking.
I would try not to say anything that isn't true, you know. I would
Back it.
say
I don't mean it. I don't
let
do
me
it.
think about it. I'd say, "Let me think about it." And then you thought about it and then you're done. So,
Well, see, I feel
but
like okay is the I'll think about it. This is like, okay, I'm not saying okay, I'm gonna do it. I'm saying
oh,
okay that I hear what you're saying and I'll get back to you at some point on that.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
So
all right.
it's
So if they know what that means, then that's too bad for them.
yeah, most of the time they don't know. They just don't know. I'm like, how didn't you know that's what I meant? I said the okay just like I would if I understand what you're saying. I hear you. I'm just not gonna do that. And that usually works for me because most people forget, and I'm happy enough to where people just forget and they're happy around me and they'll laugh.
Okay. Okay.
So, but that's taking work. That's taking a lot of work. But we
A
are
sen-
running out of. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say a sense of humor comes in handy, doesn't it?
It does. It really does. Or an infectious laugh. I like to laugh, so I'll laugh very hard at things, and that usually deters people from wanting to be upset. But I will have confrontation if need be. I just I try to have my life as peaceful as possible. And I don't want no problems if I don't have to have problems. But if I have to go there, I'll wait. So but I work on not doing that. We're running out of time.
Okay.
So I want to ask you, how can we learn more? find resources about what you do, get in touch with you?
So my website is the best place to find everything, my books, my podcast, my links to my YouTube channel. Dr. Toni, DRTONI, Cooper.com.
Awesome. Awesome. So the last question I have for you is, what is the question you have for the next guest without knowing who the next guest is?
What helps you get up in the morning?
That's coffee for me. Nah, coffee and reading a chapter out of my book. I think that's what it works for me. So I can't wait to see what the next guest says, because that will be soon. I have so many guests coming up. So thank you for being on the show. It's been a wonderful time. I've learned so much. I think I have a better outlook now on how to deal with certain things in my life that were actually bothering me. And it's synchronicitous that you would bring like this, we'd have this whole conversation, because I was literally having these problems in my head like yesterday. And I was just
Wow.
like, I'm doing too much for people. I can't stand that they don't do the same things for me. I know I should get rid of them in my life. What do I do? Like, I was literally just doing all this for the past
Mm,
week. So I'm glad we got to have this talk. I like to
awesome.
I like to end every episode with thank you for today, thank you for yesterday, thank you for tomorrow. Always remember to question your reality, and at every end there is a beginning. You guys take care. Thank you for being on the show, and I will talk to you soon.
Mm. Thanks so much for having me. This was a delight.
Thank you. And that wraps up another thought provoking episode of What Are You Even Talking About? We hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the discussion we had today. Before we go, we want to extend a huge thank you to our amazing guests. Your insights and expertise truly enriched our conversation, and we're grateful for your contribution. And of course, a massive thank you to you, our incredible audience. Your engagement, questions, and feedback make this podcast what it is. As we wrap up, let's take a moment to reflect. Thank you for today. Thank you for yesterday. Thank you for tomorrow. Always remember to question your reality, and at every end, there is a beginning. We love the journey we're on with each and every one of you. Keep those questions coming, keep challenging the status quo, and keep exploring the uncharted territories of your mind. We can't wait to dive into another riveting conversation in our next episode. Until then, take care, stay curious, and keep asking, what are you even talking about? Don't forget to subscribe, share, like, and connect with us on social media. We'll catch you in the next one. You guys take care.